Hello, good evening. For a number of years, we've reported on the truly horrifying sexual abuse of children in Rotherham. Today, we can finally report on how some of the very people who had the power to prevent it did nothing at all. The Independent Office for Police Conduct have published a report into how South Yorkshire Police investigated allegations of child sexual exploitation. It's uncomfortable to read, and here's a warning: you may find some of the details of the programme tonight distressing. It was back in 2014 when a report compiled by Alexis J confirmed there'd been widespread exploitation of young girls in Rotherham. Gangs of men, often of Pakistani heritage, would promise them treats, drinks or drugs in return for sex, a practice known as grooming. She said there could be as many as 1,400 children who'd been abused. South Yorkshire Police began Operation Clover, which saw perpetrators locked up. That's been followed by the National Crime Agency's Operation Stovewood, which continues to this day, and so far 20 people have been convicted. But from the moment the scandal was revealed, there were reports between 1997 and 2013 some police officers repeatedly did nothing when abuse allegations were made. That's what the Independent Office for Police Conduct has been looking into. Now, they've investigated 265 complaints. 43 of those were upheld. There were 8 cases of misconduct, 6 cases of gross misconduct. Those cases have been dealt with in a separate process. But of 14 officers with a case to answer, 7 faced no action because they retired, and the harshest punishment was a final written warning. It's the details of the complaints upheld which are truly shocking. They found that police did not investigate after finding an older man undressed in a room with a survivor. Another came from a father told by police his 15-year-old daughter might learn her lesson after she was allegedly raped. And officers did not deal properly with information that could have seen an abuser being prosecuted sooner. Our Home Affairs correspondent Emma Glasby has read the report, and she's spoken to some people whose lives were changed forever by this abuse, and the police is in action.
Can't even put into words or describe the pain and the trauma that they've caused so many people. They actually just turned a blind eye to what were happening.
This woman, known as Elizabeth, was a child, barely even a teenager, when she was abused. Her parents repeatedly called South Yorkshire Police, asking them to do something. It took 15 years for her attacker to be brought to justice and jailed.
There was one occasion where my dad had rang the police station, and a quite senior member of police had basically said it had been going on for a long time and that they couldn't do anything for the fear of racial tensions. When I came forward to the IOPC years later, they actually upheld that complaint.
The Independent Office for Police Conduct upheld 43 complaints. One from a father told by a police officer his 15-year-old daughter might learn her lesson after she was allegedly raped. In another, a child in an abduction case was handed over to police by a perpetrator in a deal not to arrest him. Some of the officers were unidentified, others retired or resigned without facing any action. No one at South Yorkshire Police lost their job over the failings. The IOPC says misconduct panels decide on disciplinary action and has today been defending the report.
There are criticisms that there has been no accountability because no officer has lost their job. In fact, the South Yorkshire Police and Crime Commissioner says this report lets victims down.
Well, I mean, those comments are both disappointing and surprising because the focus of this report is to draw together those systemic issues, to highlight what went wrong and why, and to highlight the learning recommendations that are designed to bring about real change. And those learning recommendations, when they were issued in November last year, were widely supported, including by the PCC.
In another part of Rotherham, another family let down by police.
Right from being about 11, 12 in social services care. That's where they started grooming her, from these children's homes.
This woman's foster daughter was groomed and abused as a child.
She named names, times and places, and I gave all the information to the police Nothing was done about it. Oh, it's one of those things. Your daughter is like this. You've just got to accept it.
The trauma continued for her foster daughter as an adult, and she died from an overdose.
The things that my daughter were going through towards the end of her life were horrific. Flashbacks, nightmares, wet in the bed. She was absolutely a physical, mental wreck.
It is now 8 years since the J report exposed the truth in Rotherham. More people have been brought to justice, 41 convictions in total. Today, South Yorkshire Police says the force is committed to investigating reports of child abuse. This was part of the latest operation in Rotherham.
We just need to have a word with you on your own, if that's all right.
4 men and a woman were arrested over allegations dating back to the 1990s. But after years of widespread abuse, there are many survivors struggling with the trauma of their childhoods.
It's something that's going to stay with me for the rest of my life. We talk about perpetrators and the trauma given by them and their abuse. Why can't we see accountability for the trauma that the police have given us? They were complicit by turning a blind eye.
Well, for a force already with a troubled reputation following the Hillsborough Stadium tragedy, this report lays bare more failings by South Yorkshire Police. I asked Deputy Chief Constable Tim Forber what he made of the report.
Really uncomfortable reading. There is no doubt, and we've known this since the Alexis J report in 2014, that South Yorkshire Police let victims of CSE down between 1997 and 2013. This report reiterates that finding. Many of my predecessors have apologised for the force's failings, and I reiterate that apology today.
A complaint upheld about 2 survivors and a perpetrator in a car. They were stopped by police. The survivor told the police she'd just performed a sex act on the perpetrator. Police did nothing. So many examples in this report of police turning a blind eye, and suggests that actually the police were complicit with what was happening.
Well, absolutely. During that period of time, 1997 to 2013, it was absolutely clear that we didn't deal with this effectively, that we let victims of CSE down. That's why it's been the subject of an independent investigation by the IOPC, and that's why the force has cooperated fully with that inquiry. 8
officers had a case to answer for misconduct, 6 for gross misconduct. Nobody was sacked. Why not?
Well, that's for the IOPC to answer.
How many officers in this report are still working for South Yorkshire Police?
In terms of, there is certainly one individual who got a final written warning and is still working for South Yorkshire Police today.
And how do you feel about that, knowing that people who turned a blind eye to this behaviour are still working within the force?
Well, the issue is this, that what I've always taken the view is that what happened in Rotherham and the scale of what happened in Rotherham can't be attributed to any single individual.
Elizabeth, who's a survivor in Rotherham, says, I can't put into words the trauma they've caused so many people. Why can't we see accountability for the trauma the police have caused?
Victims and survivors have been, and the harrowing accounts of what happened have been absolutely key to the way that we've built our services since then.
The IOPC said this is their second biggest report after Hillsborough, which also had South Yorkshire Police at the centre. Can the force's reputation ever recover from this?
South Yorkshire Police is an organisation of fantastically committed people. Every single day we have over 3,000 police officers who go out putting themselves in harm's way to protect the public, and we're absolutely committed to provide the very, very best policing service to the public of South Yorkshire.
Deputy Chief Constable for South Yorkshire Police, Tim Forber there. Meanwhile, the County Police and Crime Commissioner, Dr Alan Billings, has criticised the £6 million report, saying it tells us nothing new.
I'm disappointed. I think 8 years has been a long time. It's cost a lot of money. We were hoping to see something about the accountability of South Yorkshire Police, and there's very little here. I feel sorry for the officers who've had this hanging over them for a very long time. I feel sorry for the victims and survivors of CSE in Rotherham, because I don't think they've got any further forward with this. And I don't think we've learnt anything new.
Let's pick up that point now with Sarah Champion, Rotherham's MP. She joined us live from the Houses of Parliament. Thank you for your time this evening. Dr Alan Billings there says that the report's taken too long, tells us nothing. What are your reports? Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's taken 8 years and I've been involved with it for most of that process, as have so many Rotherham survivors, their families and indeed the broader community. What it tells us is that the victims told the truth. They told the truth decades ago. They've been trying to get their truth out there for all of this time. And then to have the South Yorkshire Police, who very clearly have been told the culture in their organisation, not of the frontline staff who are trying to make a difference, but of the senior management, the culture that they perpetuated was one of disbelieving and belittling those victims. And to not see anybody held accountable, for South Yorkshire Police not to hold their hand up and implement those recommendations, it's another kick in the teeth, to be quite honest.
I want to pick you up on that, because the police say that it's not for them to take disciplinary action. The IOPC says it's not their job either. Who is going to hold these people accountable for what happened?
Well, this is the fundamental problem. The IOPC's job is to investigate once the police force has told them that there's a problem. So first of all, you've got the hurdle, the police force has to recognise there's a problem. But then all IOPC can do is make recommendations. They haven't got the power like Ofsted or CQC going into a healthcare facility and shutting it down or forcing cultural change. So it then becomes reliant on South Yorkshire Police to actually do something about the recommendations. And I'm sorry, in any other business, in any other public sector, if there were significant failings documented to such an extent, but yet no one is going to be held accountable, I mean, you just wouldn't believe it. It wouldn't be credible. So I've written to the Home Secretary today and asked her to give the IOPC, an independent body, the powers to actually initiate their own investigations and force through the changes that we need to see to have trust in our police force.
Just very briefly, Sarah Champion, the force says it's changed. Do you believe them?
I hope that they have. I can't tell you that they have because there's no transparency. You know, what we need is a root and branch change. I don't know if that's happened or not because they're not telling us.
Sarah Champion MP, thank you for your time. Well, as the Rotherham scandal has slowly unfolded in front of us all over the last 9 years, one common theme has emerged. The young children who are now grown adults who said they were treated as though they were to blame for what happened to them. One woman repeatedly abused is Sammy Woodhouse. Now, I interviewed Sammy on this programme more than 6 years ago. She waived her right to anonymity for an interview and she continues to champion survivors. She spoke to BBC's Judith Moritz.
I would have contact with the police on a daily basis. I was never treated, as a victim. I was treated as somebody that was his mistress, his girlfriend, and somebody that was a part of his gang. I was victim blamed. There was just so many missed opportunities, and not just by the police, by other professionals as well.
So the police would stop you, but then let you go off again with the abuser?
Yeah, I remember on one occasion I was missing and I was found in a flat by police, and they actually told me to write a note to him to tell him where I was because they didn't want him to worry. My dad was threatened at one point and said if he continued to pursue things then he would be arrested. My dad gathered a lot of information and he took it to police officers, and I remember him telling me that on one occasion, one officer actually, agreed with my dad and said, I'm absolutely sick of it, the fact that this is happening and they just always get away with it.
A complaint has previously been upheld about the fact that your dad was told they couldn't do anything because it would be perceived as racist. Mm. That's something you remember?
Yeah. And I remember, I had a saying, he would often say and brag that if anything happens, he'll just play the race card. A lot of people was terrified to even raise it in case they get called racist.
The stiffest penalty any officer has had is a formal written warning. Is that enough?
I think it's disgusting. The fact that all this has happened and not one person will ever be held to account on a professional level. Lives have been ruined. It feels like report after report after report all telling us what we already know. And I think, of course, it's really important that, these investigations have got done, so we can tell the people of Rotherham, even, people around the country about what we went through. But we need people to be held to account.
And do you see evidence that the police have learned from things?
I think they still have a very long way to go. I do think we've got some slight improvements. I think we talk about things now, but let's be honest, that's because of the media and the survivors, that keep on pushing this forward. The amount of people that's been affected by this is just absolutely huge. It's affected us as a town, and we're known all over the world as the capital of exploitation.
That was Summy Woodhouse speaking there. We'll return to Rotherham later in the programme, but first let's bring you some of the day's other news. There's more disruption on the region's trains today following yesterday's strike across